Okay, I would like to start with my personal experience in teaching as far as writing is concerned. Whenever I ask students question, what problem do you have with English, especially baccalaureate students, all of them say writing. So in your opinion, why do you think writing for them is the most difficult skill, as far as your experience is concerned?
I think proficiency level, the interest, their interest concerning the topic, to what extent it appeals to them, and they don't know what's expected from them, what does the reader expect from them as a writer, and also other constraints, like time, for example.
I think the problem with writing is an inherited one. So we inherited probably from Arabic, French, and then Japanese. It's not a new one. It's not really related to English other than.
Absolutely. Don't you think that the problem of reading is inextricably linked to reading?
The more you read, the better you
write. So what I wanted to say is that there is an inextricable link between writing and reading. Okay. So this is just to link your presentation with this. Okay.
One is the input and the other
absolutely.
is the output. One is the input and the other is the output.
Yes.
One more thing, why students maybe think that writing is one of the most difficult things to acquire, to learn, or to develop. It's that stage is the hardest time, and if you don't take care of the language before, what are you going to harvest? This is what happens. Students, they want to write. You know what they are going to write about, but still they say, or said,
I don't have
vocabulary items, for
vocabulary,
example.
Right. Absolutely, good. So I'm going to start with the approaches, and the first approaches that affected the writing, of course, is the audio-lingual, and this is something that our colleagues have dealt with in the reading comprehension. And you know that the audio-lingual method is a method of teaching in general, but it has to do with the teaching of writing, and the writing was seen as, according to this approach, or this method, sorry, to develop the linguistic and the lexical knowledge for students. And you know that the focus was on the sentence structure through drills and also oral practices, and students had to transform those sentences into writing, to write those sentences, right? Okay, so as I said before, the focus is on sentence patterns, syntactic patterns we can call them, and also imitating models provided by teachers. The teacher can provide a model and students follow that model provided by the teacher. There are some, we can say, activities that can be used like a dictocom. So yeah, so the teacher can dictate text, students listen to it, and then after that students can reconstruct that text from their memory. So honestly, I've never used this. Have you?
Yeah. No.
No?
Dictation. It is used.
Dictation?
You can find it in some textbooks, for example, at the American Language Center. You can use it.
It's good. It's good.
But dictation is no longer.
Another
It's
activity
not
is
used in primary
This
school.
is not
This is not dictation.
Yeah, this is not dictation.
yes. From memory. Activity that students can do is the sentence combining. So you give students sentences, and students combine those sentences to make paragraphs or text. Okay, number two. This is approach number two. It is the paragraph pattern, and this one has appeared in the 90s, as you can see. Sorry, the 80s. Okay, and this approach focuses on two very important patterns. Number one is the functional, and number two is the organization. So there is a shift from just following a certain patterns provided by the teacher, like in the audio-lingual, to something else, which is the function of writing. So writing has to perform certain functions. Why we write? For example, here we have the narration, description, cause and effect writing. This is the functional pattern, and also the organizational pattern. For example, to teach students, this is statement, topic, sentences, paragraph unity, supporting sentences, transitions, linkers, whatever. So this is the focus on paragraph patterns, as you can see. Some exercises like, for example, reordering, irrelevant sentences, to find the irrelevant sentences, the writing topic sentences. For paragraphs, for example, you might give students supporting sentences and the students write the topic sentence, or the vice versa. This is product-based writing. Okay? So for sure, the upcoming one is going to be what? The process. Very good. Okay, the process writing, and this is something that has appeared in the 90s, as you can see. And for sure, here it means that writing is what? Is a process. Students has to go through steps. Very good. Some process, stages, phases to go through. And I guess this is what you adopt in your classroom teaching. Yes, no?
Yes.
You like it? Okay.
So, we did all the time, especially with beginners. Do we teach writing as a process?
Absolutely, very good. Process writing doesn't work according to the book with beginners.
It works with
It can. With beginners will differ from the way you are going to use it with advanced.
Yeah, and not only that, it's the lessons that the students have covered so far.
What students write. Okay? But this one is how.
Yes.
Create. Okay, it's create. All right, so it is, as I said before, according to the book, it's with advanced, it works a lot with advanced level. Maybe it might work with beginners, but not all these processes, okay? Or not all these steps. Okay, number four is discourse and genre approach. This is a little bit advanced approach. And here, as you know, there are two concepts, discourse and genre, and we'll talk about discourse, which means what?
Context.
The context, very good, which means the function of writing to achieve some
Language use.
language use to achieve some purposes. Okay. All right, so here we talk about conventions. Conventions of particular context. Each context has its own conventions. Okay, that guide the language use. All right. Social context, as I said before, it's very important. So here, the relationship between writer, reader, and the text is very important. Okay, so it has to do with how texts work to achieve purposes. As I said before, it's all about purposes. Okay, so when we talk about genre, genre has to do with the conventions. Okay, the conventions in each context. Yeah, that's exactly. Types of writing. So I have categorized the type of writing in three categories, as you can see. Number one is the institutional versus personal, and we'll talk about institutional, which means what? Sorry?
Like media editorial.
Maybe, or the writing that it has to do with some professions, like for example, business literary, academic writing. Yeah, so that's institutional, and we'll talk about personal, like for example, yes, blogs, diaries, emails, personal emails, and so on. Okay. So to the teacher and to the learners, and when we say to the teacher, to the learners, here I mean it can be we can say a proof, a way to the teacher to assess and know the development or to what extent learners are learning. So for sure, when you receive a piece of writing, you can have an idea about your students. To the learners, for example, when a student writes notes or summaries of books or text, whatever, so they learn from this. Okay. So it is a successful learning, as I said, it is a way for the teacher to test and see to what extent learners are learning, and a means of learning, for example, when I said students, when they write notes, they take notes, for example, this is a writing. When they write summaries, it's also writing. Yeah, okay. So this is also the student benefit from their own writing. Okay, we have other categories, as you can see, classification by genre, by text, so it's very clear and understandable. You can go back, it's very easy. The nature of proficiency. Now, the question here that we ask, or we can easily ask, to what extent we can say, for example, that this student is proficient in writing or not so proficient. Okay, so students should have some background, some knowledge. Okay, for example, number one, the background knowledge. What do we mean by the background knowledge? For example, number one,
knowledge of the text.
Knowledge of the text. Very good. So as you can see, different students should be aware of different types of text situations where the text can be used, expectations of the reader, what the reader is expecting from the the
Right.
writer, cultural conventions, right, which means what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in terms of writing. Number two, the cultural assumptions. Okay, the cultural assumptions is to some extent like conventional, but we can talk about conventions like organizations or organization text. For example, we can also talk about the use of topic sentence and the thesis statement. Maybe you might find in some cultures that, for example, the thesis statement is not important. For example, in writing in Arabic, if you teach essays, for example, you might notice that students end the introduction with question. This is something that was impacted from what? By what? The Arabic. This is a way. Sorry, and then?
I think this is a culture.
Yes, it's a culture.
In Arabic, we talk about fikra al-mihwariyya. In English, we talk about the topics and just come at the
Yes,
beginning.
absolutely.
In Arabic, it's not necessarily at the beginning. It can be in the middle or at
Yes,
the end.
absolutely. So this is it. We can also talk about the impact of L1, as I said before. Okay, the impact of L1. Plagiarism. So plagiarism, you might think that plagiarism is not accepted in writing, but in some other countries they say no. Plagiarism is good because you give importance to. So here we have three. We can talk about the coherence. So students should be aware of how to make their writing coherent. Style of writing, should be aware of different styles, and the use of writing strategies. So students should be aware of strategies to be used in writing. And I think I have come to the end of my part. Okay.